What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Real Powers People podcast. It's your boy. I got a guest on today named Chris. What's up, Chris?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Hey, Chris, me and Chris gonna discuss um just some tenets of fatherhood and things that you should be teaching your boys out there. As we know, fatherless homes, sons raised in fatherless homes face a lot of bad stats. You know what I mean? Like a lot of them go to prison. A lot of them do not finish high school. Uh, I think that, in general in society, the father's role is kind of downplayed as far as like what kind of structure that they bring to a household. And I should say what structure they can bring to a household. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold, y'all. But every father ain't on point. But I think structure is one of those things that males bring to the household. What do you say, Chris? What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that point. I think you added a qualifier there, just saying like, every man doesn't necessarily bring structure. That's 100% true. But for the ones that do, that kind of provide that presence of just, adding expectations, certain I guess, manly expectations, if you will, to the dynamic of like raising your son, whether it's giving them chores or just basically setting some type of expectation of progress. I think is a
Mm,
big, you know a staple for raising a boy. You kind of see these days, at least from my observation, that some of that has kind of been removed, and you end up in situations where the your son or the child can just kind of essentially kind of do what they want to do without ever really having like answer to anything or ever really having any structure. And then when structure is introduced at some point later in life, it's kind of rejected or balked at. But yeah, I definitely agree with you on that.
yeah, and you have a son, so you're speaking from firsthand experience. Me, just for the listeners out there, I don't have a child yet, but I have been working with children for over 15 years, wards of the state and children who are in behavioral programs and things like that. So sometimes these kids don't have fathers, and sometimes they have weak fathers, or just their parents got issues, period. I'm not putting everything on the father. It's just that we're discussing fatherhood. Mothers and females obviously play a role as well. But yeah, I like what you said about the expectation of progress. Um, my mother, because my father and my mother got divorced early. Uh, my mother moved back home to where she could have me around my uncle and my grandfather and other men. So I had people to look at, and but my mother held me accountable too. Um, with you, Chris, what else do you think that a man brings to a household that maybe a woman can't do on her own?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I refer back to what you just said. I think, and it's not to say that a woman can't, but I think you don't see it as often just because of, social dynamics, particularly in like, our culture. By our culture, I mean like a Western civilization.
Okay.
Whereas, basically men are going to be around men, right? It's not to say that women aren't around any men, but when they are, the dynamic is different. The interactions are different. And so the reason I emphasize that is because, one of the things that, a father can kind of bring to the household or bring to, their son particularly is having their son around other men. Now, that doesn't always necessarily, it's not always a good thing, right? It could be around the wrong type of guys, but, as a dad, I believe anyway, you should, kind of, aspire to put your son in places where they can thrive, where they can learn, they can grow, and particularly learn, thrive, and grow, being around other men, because it all kind of, in my experience and opinion, it all kind of ties in together. You know, it's like
Yeah.
that element I talked about of having certain expectations. You'll
Mhm.
see that like at least like, you know, and I think we kind of grew up in the same era. So, you know, like when we were growing up, um, whether you were playing sports in school or just, you know, some type of, you know, general activity, it didn't necessarily have to be directly related to sports, but whatever it was, if what I remember is if you were under the um, tutelage or the counsel of like men, the expectation for you to complete a certain task was different than per se if it was just kind of run by you know, women. And it's not I'm not
Nothing
saying,
against women, right? Yeah.
yeah, I'm not saying it in a negative way. What I'm saying though is like, you know, sometimes there can be a like I don't know, I'm trying to use my words carefully here, but there can be like, oh, you know, everything is okay, you participated, right? And it's like, oh, you participated, you did a
Yeah.
good job, you cried. And that's fine, you know, that's cool, there's nothing wrong with that. But you know, when you are around like achievers or around people who um have criteria, right, on how something is done, and not simply just getting it done, and not simply just participating, but actually, you know, expecting you to not maybe master it, you know, especially not initially, but you know, try to improve at it. You know, even if you've never done it before, it's like, hey, okay, yeah, I see you trying. Like, you know, keep at it, keep trying. You know, keep. So that type of environment, I think, is helpful for you know, for boys, you know, to kind of grow up in that, because I think in more cases than not, from my experience, that, you know, it it produces a different mentality. It
Yeah.
produces a mentality that, okay, I may not be great at this now, or you know, basically it removes the fear of failure or the fear of not being good at something out of the gate, and it removes that barrier of not wanting to try, right? Um, and I think that's super important, especially for, you know, for young boys, and for men ultimately, you know, grow up into being a man. Like that foundation is critical for your like success later on in life.
Oh yeah, man. And I remember having a conversation with my father like in my mid 30s. And I was still trying to rap, right? And he was like, you know, you've been trying to rap for like 15 years. You ain't went nowhere. It's time to hang it up.
Right, right.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's a certain level of concrete realism, like hit you straight in the chest, you know, not to hurt you or anything, but to bring that reality, like, wake up. This is
Yeah,
what you need to do now. You know what I mean? And like, you know, anybody's capable of that. You know, my mom has done it too, but it's something different when a father does it. And I think we see that even within households, right? Or when you see you know, families interacting together, the kid, you know, a child may talk back to his mother, may ignore his mother. His mother may have to say something repeatedly over and over and over again until he stops doing what he's doing. But then you know that fatherly presence may come in and say, hey, if you don't sit down, then everything stops.
right.
You know, and so and you see it in the animal world too, like with the gorillas and whatnot. You know what I mean? There's like so many different examples of like why it's important to have both parents. And I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious because it's quintessential to reproduction, you know,
Right.
but even just raising them, you know what I mean? It's um I think, you know, I would urge especially black fathers to be in the home because America takes, you know, liberties with our youth
Yeah.
as far as miseducating them, throwing them in the legal system, you know, so many different things. And, you know, the kids that I see out here, man, uh, very emotional.
Right.
You know, and I did a podcast earlier on emotions that get you killed. And so many of our boys are being killed out here either by each other or by the police. And a lot of it is because there's not an older man to have given them that knowledge and that foresight.
Hmm.
I want to ask you, you know, if you don't mind, what kind of things, what kind of lessons do you teach your son?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. So, hey, actually, you just touched on a few of them. Reality, right? Kind of like the example you gave as you were talking with your father about like your aspirations to be a rapper. Sometimes like you said, you have to deliver. I think that's part of the responsibility, really, of being a parent, but specifically being a father, is to try to, as best you can, deliver that sense of reality. Like I said, not in a way to like damage or hurt your children or your son, but you do want to apply a certain amount of like sincerity and firmness at times.
Yeah.
Um, to where they get the point, and they can kind of see, it can be it can alter their perspective on, in a positive way, hopefully, on something that maybe they were headstrong about. Because one thing I say it now, but I used to say that a lot, but particularly when my son was smaller, is like, they're operating from a certain lens, right? And they're pretty much operating from um, limited information on a lot of stuff. And so when you kind of look at it from that point of view, even if you put yourself in those shoes, if you remember being a child, it's like things that you were really headstrong about, things you thought were great ideas, or thought were really fun, or whatever. You only seeing it from a certain perspective. You didn't really see the full picture, right? You didn't see like what was on the other side of that, or what's involved in it, etc. So yeah, I think one of the things that's really important is to kind of, like I said, be that voice of reason, be that kind of fixed point when it comes to how to kind of shape perspective without being out in left field, so to speak, or like too far out of away from the reality of things. Um,
You mean like too complex for them to understand, or
well, not even necessarily too complex. Just sometimes we again like we're basically off base. I feel particularly as younger people, we're off base when it comes to like our pursuits, right? We and we'll spend a lot of time, spend cycles on trying to on an endeavor that is fruitless, right? And if nobody comes in, or if your father doesn't come in and kind of like, hey, I see what you're doing, I see what you're trying to do, but like it's not going to work the way you think it is, or whatever, just kind of like level set you, and maybe kind of help you either retool that idea, that that pursuit, to where it can be beneficial. Or I'm speaking very high level, speaking in general, but and the gist of it is that you need somebody that can kind of serve as a guide, kind of help you navigate through things. It's not necessarily about being a robot, and taking away your autonomy. It's about, but trying to again, yeah, be a guide, and help you navigate your decisions, and maybe help you see them beyond what you're looking at in the moment, right? Like, it's easy to get excited about something, particularly when you're younger. It's like, oh yeah, I like, put myself, for example. I was really big into basketball. We used to play basketball all the time. I wanted to pursue it professionally, or whatever, or try to, at least. And and that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to train and practice, and, become really efficient at different key things. And kind of like you were saying, like with the rap aspiration, is like, at some point you have to realize that, yeah, you put a lot of time and effort into this, but and that's cool on the surface, but you're not going in the direction you think you are, right? It's not going the way that you think it is. And sometimes that can be hard for us as younger people to see, because we uh I feel like part of that is just, our culture is like, oh, anything is possible. And I guess technically that's true, but you also want to be realistic. I feel like, you can waste a lot of time not being realistic. And so again, I'm tying that back to like, fatherhood. I feel like, a good father, a good parent, but a good father will kind of, if he's involved with his child, involved, you'll be able to see what your kids are interested in, and the directions that they're trying to go, and you can help be a guide. you may, I mean, it's not to say that you know everything about everything they want to do or whatever, but if you don't, maybe you can put them in, which is going to be the next part is, putting them in the right spaces if if possible, which has a lot to do with the kind of relationships that the father has or, is able to create. Um, because, none of us know everything, but if you have resources. By resource, I'm not talking about like monetary resource. I'm talking about like you know s- um, social equity. You know what I mean, or
Yeah,
social
yeah.
capital to be able to. Hey, I know somebody who's involved in this, or or a friend of mine knows somebody who's involved in it, whatever, right? You can those type of things can be beneficial to your children because then it's like you can leverage that in their as they grow and as they're trying to pursue different things or as they want to know stuff they can they might have someone that they can reach out to and that beyond you but it's kind of comes through you um unofficially if you will so yeah does that make sense like you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, you said a mouthful, man. But yeah, yeah, I agree with all that, and I see it in person because a family member of mine, he passed. He had three kids, but he had an immense amount of relationships, and even me being, one of his relatives, I'm able to reap some benefits off of those relationships.
Yeah.
So, and he was a father figure to me as well. So it was what you said is exactly on point. Do you think that it's good to push your kid to like learn different skills or be exposed to different things, and even if they don't want to do it?
Yeah, I do agree with that. So one of my mentors told me years ago, and this was I was actually yeah, this was post college for me. So it was, it was one of those things that I wish I would have known this younger, but it was what he said was, when it comes to like raising your kids and stuff like that. And I've heard this from multiple people, but he just kind of really broke it down. What he said was, you want to give them the opportunities. Now they may not gravitate towards everything, right?
Yeah,
But um giving them the opportunity to explore basically is what it comes down to. They're able to find out what they like because again, I'm gonna make a reference back to at least how I grew up, or like a lot of the people, a lot of my peers and stuff growing up, like our opportunities were limited, for various reasons. Um, and so, there might have been things that you wanted to pursue. I'll just throw this out to like boating, for example, right? Like, both you and I grew up in the city. And a lot of things that while they're possible, there's an option to do. If you don't know anything about the avenue to get there, right? You don't really know that it's achievable for you. Then it basically seems impossible, right? It's like you might see it on television or something, but you don't have any direct um, association with it. So it's like, oh well, that looks fun, whatever. But I don't know if I will actually like it or not. So yeah, I mean, I do agree that giving your kids, opportunities, putting them in, giving them a chance to do different things, kind of pushing them in some cases to do different things. Because again, this goes back to what I was saying about young people's perspective. A lot of times we kind of gravitate towards, particularly as younger people, I feel like, a lot of us gravitate towards what we immediately associate with some type of, happiness or euphoria, right? But we don't, and then sometimes we can kind of close off to where it's like you don't really have an interest, or at least not an immediate interest in anything else, or a very limited interest in anything else, simply because it's not that one thing that or one, two things that you really vibe with, whether that's playing video games or whatever it is, right? It's like, it's like, no, this is what I do. And we kind of like develop an identity around that. And it's not to, say there's anything wrong with that, but I do think that from a development point of view, and from what I've seen with, like I work with kids and stuff as well. And, it seems to be more enriching and more fulfilling for kids that actually get the opportunity to do stuff outside of that proverbial box, right? Like they might not have known they had an interest in, or they may not have it, an innate interest in archery or chess or just all these different things, whether puzzles or whatever, or drawing, artistry, instruments, etc. But once they actually get the opportunity to try it, sometimes it sparks something, right? It's like, oh, I actually do like this, so I want to, become better at this, and and that turns into a entirely different conversation about how can they stick with it or whatever. But from a development perspective, yeah, I do believe that it's better to if possible, if you can, to put your kids in different spaces, just to have them try stuff. They might not like all of it, they may not decide to pursue all of it, but at least at the very minimum, and this is what my mentor was telling me, at least they had the experience, right? At least they could look back and say, well, yeah, I did try that. And I
Mm.
know for a fact that I don't like it, or I didn't like it then, right? Versus just saying, I feel like a lot of times, again, like as we grew up, um, I would hear a lot about what people don't like, but they never even tried it. You know what I mean? They don't know anything about it, but it was just like, yeah, no, I don't like that. Well, how do you know? So I think it definitely is beneficial.
And when you told me that you were teaching your son how to fly planes, I thought that was just like the flyest thing in the world, bro. You know what I mean? I still feel that way. You know what I mean? Like how many guys are teaching their kid how to fly a plane? Not only that, but especially in the black community, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like you said, how many of us has access to things like that,
Yeah.
or even try to get our kids to be interested in seeing how far that they can push their talents and their skill set, you know.
Yeah.
So that to me was just like super cool. And it made me think, when I have kids of my own, the type of things that I want to expose them to so that they don't feel stuck. And like I think about Indian culture and some of these Eastern cultures and Middle Eastern cultures and stuff where the family is really tight knit and the parents kind of have a strong hand over what the kid is going to do with their life.
Right.
And sometimes I think like, is it better to I don't think it's good to have that strong hand and just you can kicked out the family if you
Right.
become
Right.
a doctor. Like I don't agree with that. That's extreme.
Yeah.
But I do feel like sometimes I see kids out here and they are the epitome of that old adage. Uh, what would they say? An empty mind is the devil's playground or something.
Right. Right. Yeah. Idle Times, Devil Workshop. Yeah. That type. Yeah.
Right. And like there's a lot of that. There was that when I was growing up. There were kids who wasn't doing nothing else. So what they end up doing, hanging on the block, you know,
Right.
hanging on the corner. Then that turns into drug use. Then it turns into, possibly gang banging or having a kid at a young age. And it's like, no, I think a child's mind, a boy's mind needs to be cultivated.
Yeah.
You know, you
That's exactly it. Yeah.
you can't just leave it.
Yeah.
And like I've worked with so many kids that when they haven't been exposed to a lot, they kind of start to feel like life is hopeless whenever bad things happen.
Yeah.
And so like I want to encourage the listeners, get your kids into some kind of extracurricular activity. There's a lot of training online as well, for things. What's that? Khan Academy is good.
Yep.
If I had a kid, I'd probably try to get them into karate or something like that because I also think that for a boy in particular, they have to be able to be confident and be able to stand up for themselves
Yeah.
because bullying is at like an all-time high. At- how have you handled that? I don't know if your son was ever bullied or anything, and if he wasn't, and you haven't experienced it firsthand, how would you handle that if your son was bullied?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I'm going to answer it and kind of tie it in and like partially extrapolate what you were just talking about as well about like um you know kind of kids having idle time or like you're not not having anything productive to do. I'm going to kind of tie all that together because I think there's a correlation there, and hopefully I can communicate this effectively. So to dive in a little bit on what you were saying, What I've seen, with not only with my own son, but just with kids, like I, work with kids of varying ages, basically about four, all the way up to teenagers, and um, in different ways, like you were saying, when they don't have anything really to do, or they haven't, been exposed to much, and a lot of times they just kind of develop this nonchalant, or what's the word, apathetic,
Yeah,
attitude. Um, Even when they are eventually exposed to things, or given the opportunity, it's kind of like a light switch. And not all cases, but in a lot of them, I say like 80% of the time, at least in my experience, like they're like, they were probably, comfortable with the idea of not doing anything because they didn't know they had the opportunity, or, whatever the root cause of that is, but they actually still want to do things. And when they are actually involved in whatever it is, it could be fishing, it could be boating, it could be like you said, learning how to fly planes. Like I work with cadets in the Air Force and stuff like that. Or I'm sorry, not in the Air Force, but young cadets that were like, have an interest in either going to the Air Force or something like that. And like one of the things that they do is we do what they call O flights, observation flights, and and they can take different avenues from there. But basically, a lot of these kids are inner city kids from like the surrounding area that ordinarily wouldn't have had the opportunity to even be in that situation, to be able to fly a plane, or what have you. But um once they get in there, some of them are just like, they, again, may not be their cup of tea, and that's totally fine. I'm just using that as an example. But, ultimately, I've seen where, given the opportunity to try stuff that was outside of their comfort zone, a lot of times kids do gravitate towards it. In summary, is kind of what I'm getting at. And I think that ties into confidence, which was another thing you mentioned. Which, and then I'll get to the bullying aspect. A lot of times, especially for us as men, and I think it kind of starts in boyhood. Confidence for us, a lot of times, is really kind of rooted in like achievement, or
yeah.
like, or experience, right? So it's like, even if you're not the best at something, or you haven't like, mastered it, or you might still be trying. It's just understanding that you're not going to give up, right? That's an element of confidence. And, it's understanding that I'm not great at this right now, but I'm going to keep at it, right? And when you have that kind of mentality, it shapes you. You behave differently than you do when it's if you feel deflated and defeated because things didn't work out the way, or aren't working out currently the way you want them to, etc. Um, and so yeah, I think having confidence has some type of correlation, maybe not a direct one-to-one, but has some type of correlation to again, like being able to experience things, and figure out what you like, figure out, what you want to be good at, start trying to pursue things, having the right people in your corner. Like a lot of this stuff is just, it's interrelated, or but for the bullying aspect of it, like my son is I mean he's tall now.
Mhm.
But even when he was smaller, he was always kind of like big for his age, I guess. But there's inevitably somebody's going to try it, right? And there's been not opportunity, but there have been times where he was in situations where somebody was trying to pick on him or whatever, and he wasn't having it. And it was actually one of the coolest things to kind of see as a parent,
Mhm.
to kind of see your child like stand up for himself, you know what I mean, like, and not like cower down. And I think a lot of that comes from the home, not just me as a dad, but a mom as well. It's like, it just, a lot of it has to do with them kind of knowing, like, where they come from, who they are, and so forth. But I remember one situation when he was 6 or 7. He was small at this point, and he was at a after school program. I think it was either artistry or like drumming. I can't remember which particular one it was, but while they were waiting on the instructor, or it might have been capoeira, but while he was waiting on the instructor, the kids were playing with a ball outside or whatever, and somehow there was a bit of a discrepancy, and um, one of the boys called himself trying to like intimidate my son by like throwing the ball at him, like, aggressively. And
Mhm.
my son caught the ball and he just looked at him and just like threw it out in the street. And and just kind of looked at him like, I dare you to, say or do anything. And the other kid just buckled. And and it was funny because if you kind of have to know my son. My son was not being a bully. He wasn't being, But it was a clearly a situation where this kid felt comfortable trying to like, trying to challenge him, trying to like, intimidate him. And he just, he wasn't having it. And that was just one of, multiple situations that have occurred over the years. So yeah, I mean, I think, people are gonna try you, kids are gonna try you. Um, and but to getting back to your point, you're like my son, he was in capoeira when he was smaller. We both do jujitsu now, which is pretty cool. He definitely goes a lot more than I do just because of my schedule as of late. But but it's something that we kind of pursue, together. It's kind of like father and son. But also like to your point, like knowing how to defend yourself, right? Like knowing how to handle situations, know how to think on your feet, things like that. If an adverse situation comes up. So yeah, I think all of that stuff is really important. How to handle bullying or like, teaching, kids. I like one thing that we always kind of taught our son, is like really, one element of it is being mindful of who you're around. Um,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And that's a very high level general statement, but it's basically not being so caught up in wanting to be a part of the group or whatever to where you lose sight of like who's in that group and what kind of people are in that group. And if you find yourself in a situation where somebody's like trying to pick on you or trying to uh kind of get you out of your comfort zone in terms of your morality, what is right or wrong. There's nothing wrong with walking away from it. There's nothing wrong with you kind of like standing your ground essentially, and just declaring, hey, I'm not with this. You know what I mean? Fortunately, like I said, now he's like 6'3" or 6'3" plus, so that message is easier delivered than if you're smaller. But
right.
you know what I mean? But even when he was small, like he didn't really have fortunately he didn't really have much of a challenge, like when those situations came up to stay on the right side of the tracks, if you will. So, yeah, I think a lot of it just really kind of comes down to like what how you reassure, affirm your kids, particularly as a dad, but the mother as well. Because if they know they have that foundation at home, I think that, or or somewhere they have that foundation with like whoever they, are, um, their guardian or whoever they are comfortable with from that authoritative perspective, then it's different. I think they have some type of like foundation to stand on, right? So it's like when they're challenged out in the real world, even as younger people, um, they don't feel like they have to cave as much. They kind of know like, well, no, I know where I come from. You know what I mean?
So another question that I think might be useful for listeners to hear, especially women who are single mothers, was do you have any advice that you would give to single mothers that are raising boys in general and in situations where the boys may be acting out or having some behavioral issues?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So my general advice is pretty closely related to what we've been discussing. To the degree in which you can, I would say try to, get your boys involved in as much positive things that you can. It doesn't have to be sports.
Right.
um, Sports is great, for different reasons. Sports can be a great teacher. There's a lot of correlation to things in life in terms of trying and achieving and so forth. But it doesn't have to be sports. And I understand, being a single parent, being a single mother, raising a boy or boys is challenging, very challenging. Challenging is probably an understatement. Um, and so, I'm saying that, you might not have all the time in the world to do different things that you might want to do. But I would just say that if you can, maybe build a support system, by that I mean like, enlist friends or maybe family members if they're available, things like that. They can maybe help you get your son to, camps or
Mhm.
because there's all kinds of stuff out here. Like um I'll refer back to something that I was doing like with my goddaughters and stuff like that when I was, trying to help and raise them, and my son as well. He was also involved in this. Um, there are like programming classes. There's videography. What do you call it? Like editing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Advanced editing. Like there's stuff like, for example, Apple. if you're anywhere near like an Apple store, they have like free classes that you can take your kids to. They don't
Mm,
last all day, but it's something for them to, for them to do. It kind of getting back to that topic of, getting them involved and stuff or getting them exposed to stuff. Um, but yeah, I would just say, in general, those are some recommendations. Try as best you can to what makes sense to get them around, get them involved in something productive. But again, I understand the reality of it. Kind of growing up in the inner city myself, it's easier said than done. Like if you don't have a vehicle or something like that, going from one side of
yeah,
the city to another that can be a challenge. Things you might not have those amenities in your neighborhood. Um, and that's why I mentioned the whole support system thing because if you can maybe enlist the help of a trusted friend. I'm not saying to dump your kid off with anybody. I'm certainly not an advocate of that. But
mm,
if you have like a family member, something like that, that might be able to help get you and your son from point A to point B, so that you can participate in something. Um, that can be helpful. So yeah, I mean, like I say, in general, that's my recommendation. For boys that might be acting out a little bit, whether that's in school or just, somewhat defiant at home or both. Um, that can be a challenge. That can even be a challenge, for men raising boys, but
right.
typically, men kind of, fall back on the whole authoritative, I'm bigger, stronger than you type thing. But as a mom, you do definitely want to maintain that sense of authority, that sense of like, you're not trying to be your child, your son's friend per se, right?
Yeah.
You do want to. I do believe in kind of. This is something that I've learned is being a parent is something that really like uh, was given to me from like my son's grandmother and his mom and stuff like that. Like it took a little while for me to grasp this concept, but I think it is helpful. That concept is, kind of looking at your kids as, the human beings, but as somebody to be respected, right? Like I think a lot of times coming from the generation we came from, at least in my household slash environment, neighborhood, etc. We're always taught like, respect is earned. You're a kid, what do you know, that type of thing. But you also kind of have to look at things from what kind of result are you trying to yield, right? What do you actually want to produce in this child? What do you want this child to turn out to be? So that being said, you're kind of looking at it from reverse engineering it to a degree. You want to treat them in a way that you can communicate or exemplify that you are respecting them without like dominating them. Basically, is what I'm trying to say, especially for boys because I've seen this, I've kind of lived it, and I'm interested in your opinion,
Mhm.
but dominating particularly a young boy, whether it's the dad or the mom, but particularly like a single mom, that doesn't usually pan out too well. The way that's like internalized and so forth, psychologically, and the way that it essentially gets portrayed later on in life in in their like choices and stuff like that is usually not that good. So I wouldn't, personally I wouldn't recommend that. But yeah, I would just say, again, try to, maintain that sense of authority as much as you can. Try to respect them where find ways to respect them, but also be, firm. And basically what I'm getting at is you don't have to again be like a dominating force. You don't have to be. It doesn't have to be like you don't have to be a tyrant, right? You can see if you can get to know your son. A lot of times acting out is it's what they always say. Is looking for attention, but that's obvious. That's honestly true.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, they're probably dealing with something or some things, and they don't obviously they're kids. They don't know how to express articulate what's going on with them, even if they're like teenagers, right? How many of us actually even heck, even as adults, you know what I mean? How many of us really know how to like express and articulate like what is actually going on with us? Why, like I feel this way or this impacted me in this way and I want to discuss it. That isn't, common. So I think it's important to try to get to know your kid, try to build up a level. That's why I talk about the respect, because with the respect kind of nurtures trust. And if they feel like they can trust you, they can talk to you. And that might help mitigate some of that acting out, right? Because it's like whatever it is that they're dealing with, if it's something that doesn't necessarily require like professional clinical help, it might be mitigated, or you might be able to get around it or get over it through just proper communication. You know, taking an interest in things they do, if they do, if they have an interest in something, or finding something for them to be interested in, and then taking an interest in that, or at least in their advancement in it. Like, I would say, make every effort you can to do so.
Yeah, when you talk about the respect piece, I think people, when it comes to human interaction, um, it's really about the little things, the so-called little things.
Yeah.
And one of the little things that people seem to skip straight past all the time is listening.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially like you said, when it comes to a kid, it's that that feeling that you don't know anything yet. You're only 11 years old. You know what I mean? But like a human being knows when you are paying attention and when you're listening, and that's very frustrating for a kid when the whole world is telling them what to do and nobody's listening to what they're saying. Even though, like
Yeah.
you said, they can't articulate everything perfectly. You have to be able to read between the lines a lot of the time, and that's something that me in my profession, I've had to I've had to develop that muscle. I've had to develop these ears. You know what I mean, and just be able to
Yeah.
shut up, even when said child was completely out of order. But if
Yeah.
they, but if they're giving me the grace to sit there and tell me what was going through their mind at that time, why they did what they did, is better for me to listen to them than to yell at them or to remind them why it's wrong. Let me hear you out first. What was going through your mind? Why did you do this? And then we're going to talk about why that wasn't right. We're going to talk about what the consequences were and what they're going to be. And then we're going to develop a way to avoid this next time. And I don't think I don't know if everybody does that with their kid. You know what I mean? I don't know
Yeah.
if everybody has that kind of heart to heart when something goes wrong and it's not just blame, blame, blame. It's like, hey, you made a mistake. Mistakes are fine. It doesn't make you less of a person. I don't have to treat you as less of a person because, in reality, your child is a whole nother person. you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
like, and then people look at children more as I own you.
Right.
And that's just not the reality because that kid's going to do whatever they're going to do. And to kind of bounce off of that, one thing that I wanted to say was just that when it comes to raising your kids, raising your sons, I just want listeners, I hope I'm not preaching to the choir here, but I probably am. But your kid can grow up to be a bum. You know what I'm saying? If you do not guide them correctly, if you don't have a hands-on approach, they can grow up to be useless to society. And I don't care how cute they are. I don't care how much you love them. You have to guide them because they can just sit up here and have a terrible life. There are some people out there that just feel like everything is just going to be sweet. But I've seen too many times, people who continue to make the same mistakes because they didn't have any support.
Yeah.
Um, I think when it comes to fatherhood, like you say in the West, um, I don't know. I don't know if we kind of have our own cultural ways of doing it. I haven't studied it like that, but I think we kind of do, right? Like it's not just fatherhood, it's like manhood. It's all kind of encapsulated, right? Would you
Right.
so
No, I agree with you. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I certainly don't, don't pretend to be an expert on like, all different cultures, in Eastern or other parts of the world. But what I do know from interacting with people from different cultures and talking with them about like how they're or just directly observing how they grew up or how they are growing up with their fathers and stuff like that, or like, what manhood, what masculinity looks like, and stuff like that. It is different. Definitely say that. I'm not gonna say whether it's better or worse or anything like that, but it's definitely different. Um, and depending on, like I said earlier, the product and that what you're trying to turn out, or like as you were saying, I mean, your child is a human being, they're a person, right? They're young. And that's really the whole that's why it's so important, on like what you pour into them, how you pour into them, because they're absorbing a lot of information. They're absorbing information from their environment, behavior, et cetera. Um,
right.
but yeah, I mean, like how we shape our kids, ultimately determines on I mean, it determines what they do when they get older. In many cases, I mean, some people grow up and they just become self-aware. They have a more introspective view on on their life or whatnot. And they'll say, okay, I recognize this or that from my parents. I don't want to do this or that. I'm gonna go in a different direction. But a lot of times it's just a continuation, right? It's just a continuum. It's like, well, they grew up a certain way, parents behave a certain way, you know what I mean, socially and so forth. They handle conflicts a certain way in their house, and that's just kind of what they continue in. So, um,
Yeah,
yeah, I agree with you. You definitely want to pour into your kids. You don't want them to be a bum or a burden on society, and just take a kind of laissez-faire approach to raising them, and be interactive. Be active as much as you can, as much as makes sense. Um, I always say that with somewhat of a grain of salt because again, I understand some people, even in two-parent households, sometimes parents are working,
yeah,
both parents work multiple jobs, whatever, or time is limited, right? Because you're trying to provide a house, household instability and things like that, and obviously that costs money and that takes time. But as I said, as much as you can, you know, um, hopefully you are taking advantage of the time when you have it to shape your kids and guide them, and because it makes a difference. It definitely makes a difference. They're looking for that, believe it or not.
right.
They want that information, that insight from you, and that they want to understand you pretty much as much as you're or as much as you should be trying to understand them. They're whether or not they articulate or express it, they're watching you. You know what I mean? They're trying to see what you do and why you do it, things like that. So
Yeah, and I
uh
was telling my girl, I was like, um, as a parent, I get intellectually, obviously, like I said, I don't have a kid, but intellectually, I get how like to instill certain things in my child, certain lessons and principles and things of that nature, and certain structure, I would have to risk being disliked. And that has
yeah.
to be okay because I love them enough that they may dislike me for a time or for a day or whatever it is. But it's like, that's fine. You'll get over it. I'm teaching you something for the long term that you don't see yet.
Hmm.
And that's what you kind of don't do when, like you said, you want to be your kid's friend.
Right.
Even with the clients that I have, I'm not their friend, and I tell them that. And some of them
Right.
have said, "Well, you're my friend or whatever." No, I am your counselor, and the relationship may be something of a big brother or father type of relationship. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
On a professional level, but
Right.
it's still like no, we are not on the same level. Like you are a kid, and I respect you, but no, you know what I mean? It's
Right.
no, period. Sometimes it's just like that, and I'm thinking of experiences I've had where Like I had a kid who was stressing out one time, and he was pacing and working himself up, and I was trying to be nice to him, and I'm saying, hey man, why don't you have a seat? Or, why don't you sit down and try to take a breather? And I had told him this about 3 times. And it just kind of kicked in. It was like a parental type of voice. I was like, sit down. You know what I mean? And
Right.
yeah, he sat down and shut up in like half a second. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and I didn't have to keep going. He sat down and he shut up and he just looked at me
Right.
and started to tell me about whatever was bothering him. But it was just a funny experience because while I'm not a father, it's still that kind of dynamic still exists,
Yeah.
between older males and younger males. And that's why I had brought up like the cultural fatherhood
Yeah.
across, I was saying across the world, but really the question to get to the point of it was, do you think that there's anything that, the larger community of men can do, whether they're fathers or not, um, to help like push, I don't know, kind of like make things better for the next generation of boys coming along.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So to that point, I think that one of the elements that, as men that we could, collectively do is the sense of community. So, and by community, I really mean like accountability
Uh,
for not only our kids, but if you don't have kids, you still want to you have some type of I'm reluctant to use the word vested interest, but in a way it is because like I mean they're part of your community as well. So you want to see them do well and be safe and that type of thing. Um, but yeah, I think kind of taking a more collective, collaborative approach
what
in
kind
the
of approach?
community. Say again.
What kind of approach?
A collective and collaborative approach, meaning
Okay.
like you said, a man may not necessarily have kids of his own. Doesn't mean he doesn't have anything to impart if he's doing it from a trying to be positive and productive and he probably still has skills. He probably he has something that he can provide right to the kids. He can teach them something. He can teach them a trade or a skill, craft, what have you. He can maybe give some of his time, or a group of men can give some of their time to, giving. And this is kind of ties back into like the single mother thing we were talking about. Um, you know, if guys gave their time to maybe I don't know start like a little rec football league or something, you know what I mean? Like just something where it's like, hey, let's take these boys for a few hours, you know, give them something constructive to do, maybe teach them some skills, be sports, chess could be a chess club, it could be, um, you know, drawing or art or painting or, heck, cooking, culinary, whatever it is that you're good at. Um, you can pass those skills on, to, get younger, boys, younger men exposed to other stuff, you know what I mean? So that, and at the same time, you're providing a service because, like I said, maybe it's a few hours, maybe it's, an hour or two here, three, on a weekend or something like that. But that's time that those young men are around other positive men they get to see. Because I mean, like I said, a lot of this I feel really intertwines. It all relates. At the end of the day, even if because I'm sure you've probably had this experience. If you when you go if you're playing basketball, playing a sport, right? Well, more than likely, unless your dad happens to be the coach, your dad's not the coach. But
Yeah.
similar to the example that you were given, where it's like, I'm not your friend. I'm the mentor. I'm the counselor. There's still an authoritative element there, and you're still the one who is, you know, giving some type of guidance, some type of instruction, providing some type of service to where this younger person, this younger young man or this child is looking to you for direction, right, in some way. And while that kind of gets glazed over, that's really important. Like that's it's monumental, particularly when the kids don't have that. You know, it's
Right.
maybe a little different for the ones who have like active fathers and stuff like that, and they kind of used to be in that type of environment. They just they can participate, but it's not like they don't get that at home already. But for the ones that don't, that can be huge. It can be life changing.
Right.
Um, and so yeah, like I said, everything doesn't have to be sports, but I think having that type of service to the community, as men, I think is huge. It's something that those boys can then, it matures. It continues. Like those same boys who grew up under that type of guidance in that type of environment, it sets an expectation that that's what they should do when they get older, right?
Yeah.
And and then they want to, they get older and they're not, so self-serving. Not to say you neglect your family or anything like that when if you have one, if you choose to have one, but you can be giving of your time and your talents to, you know, younger men, to the youth, to try to help them, grow up and have other experiences and things like that, or just something, sometimes just to get away, just something to enjoy.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. I also feel like because these kids, teenagers, young men, I'm assuming that they're online all the time,
Right.
social media and all of that. And people my age are on there all the time too, and older.
Hmm.
But one thing that I see as somewhat of a disservice that we do as men in general, and I can't speak about every man, but with me being black, my eyes are mostly on the black community, and so when I look at us as black men, and maybe it's just my algorithm, man, you know what I'm saying, but it seems like older men still tend to behave and have conversations that teenagers have.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
And it's like that's not to me, that's not the conduct that's becoming for, pushing the culture forward.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And like for the young boys to see that is like, okay, these like I saw something where some older cats. They got to be in their 40s, probably almost 50 now, right? And they're part of the hip hop community. I don't know that. I can't. I'm not going to say the name,
Yeah.
but they were asking like, how many bodies does a girl have to have before you consider her, loose or whatever? And,
Right.
and to me, it's like I get it. You're doing entertainment, but you also have a platform. And like
Yeah.
when you have a big platform where you can reach hundreds of thousands or millions of people, and it's like, man, can't you talk about something more enlightening? Or is that
Hmm.
going to get you the views? But this is the thing: you may start you may start a trend
Yeah.
in talking about something that actually has substance to it, and for me, it's just like look at your age. Like a 16-year-old could have this conversation and come to the same conclusions. So
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
the conduct of men, just as like I don't even know the word that I'm trying to come up with, but almost like uh just that not father figures, I guess, but in how like when we grew up, everybody wanted to be like Michael Jordan and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like like what do you call it? Role models?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Exactly. Yeah. Role model or yeah, some type of yeah.
because whether we want to be a role model or not, if you're a public person, you're probably more likely to be a role model because
Yeah. Or
everybody
at
knows,
least some type of influencer. Yeah.
yeah, you're going to be an influencer. So to me, I think men in general should start to conduct themselves at a more mature level to where they are in life. Because you making all this money, talk about how you got to the bag. You know,
Right.
I like earn your leisure because that's what they do. You know,
Yep. Yeah.
but there's some other people that don't. They just talk about frivolous topics, and yeah, I guess for me, that's just what I think that young men. need to see is like men who push the envelope,
Yeah.
who are actually moving forward. What kind of conversations do we have? Is it just the same conversations we've been having since high school? Because that's stupid, you know. So yeah, that's I guess I wanted to have my little rant.
No, I agree with that, man. I've made that assessment many a time. Whether I'm just having a conversation with you or just something that I observe. Yeah, I mean, the nature of the conversation should evolve definitely as men or black men in our community and so forth. Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. I think it's stupid to sound like a teenager, and you're 30 plus years old, and your perspectives, your mentality, your ideology hasn't evolved. You know what I mean? You're still conducting yourself, speaking, and concerned with the things of someone that's going into their junior year in high school or something. It's silly. Um, I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, we definitely need to elevate the conversation, um, particularly for those, like you say, who have a platform to where younger people are probably listening because it's. I mean, whether it's intended or not, the reality of it is a lot of these things kind of become rhetoric and they get repeated and it becomes for some people it shapes their behavior, becomes their they adopt the ideology, right?
Yeah,
Positive or negative, whether it's quote unquote toxic or healthy. Um,
it becomes
so
internalized.
yeah, exactly. So why not try to put something out there that's gonna be more helpful than harmful, right?
Yeah. Um, so I appreciate having this conversation, Chris. I think we touched on a lot of important and thought-provoking and profound things. I hope that the listeners enjoyed it. Do you have any final thoughts on this topic about like, you know, what parents should teach their sons or how they should rear them? What's
Uh,
beneficial?
Yeah, no, and like you said, I think we covered a lot. A lot of important things, at least as we see it, right? And like I said, I would just reiterate, um, get involved, try to as best you can, try to find things, think outside the box, I mean, we got the internet, what I'm saying, which is way different than it was when you and I were growing up. There was no internet, you know what I mean? You didn't have mobile phones or whatnot where you can just like, look up activities, best things to do in your city or things to do for a 5 year old or whatever. That didn't exist, but it does now. So, if you have the opportunity to do those things, do it, don't just take the easy way out. Just, I mean, everybody gets tired, we all get tired. We all got stuff to do. But if you have a kid, you have a son or daughter, it's not not dismissing the young ladies out there, but if you have a kid, it's really your duty as a parent to within the best of your ability try to put them, in um, position to advance, whatever that means, to advance in a positive direction.
Mhm.
So yeah, I definitely, enjoy the conversation, man. It's always great, just chopping it up with you and talking about these different things, giving our perspectives on these critical areas, elements of life, man. So definitely appreciate the invite. It's been great.
Yeah, great conversation, man. I look forward to having you back sometimes, discussing something else. I really appreciate you. And I appreciate y'all for listening. This has been the Real Power is People podcast. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any thoughts, if you have anything that you want to share. If we don't know what the hell we talking about, hey, put it in the comments.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me know.
uh, all right, y'all. Peace, love. We out.